Well, good morning, everyone. Today I'm joined by Professor Charles King, and Charles is Professor of International Affairs and Government at Georgetown. Most recently served as chair of our Department of Government. He recently wrote the New York Times bestseller, Gods of the Upper Air, how a circle of renegade anthropologists reinvented race, sex, and gender in the 20th century. And we'll talk about this in our conversation today. So Charles, thank you for taking the time to be with us for this conversation. And let's begin. Let me ask you, your expertise in history and government ranges from nationalism to authoritarianism to urban history. Can you share a bit more about your interests as a scholar? What draws you to the ideas that you explore in your scholarship?
Well, somebody looking at the books I've written, Jack, might say I'm easily bored because I do seem to jump around. But I started out my career working on Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union. My first time out of the United States was to a place called the Soviet Union, which of course doesn't exist anymore. I got on a plane in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and got off a plane in Helsinki and then on a train to what was then Leningrad. And I was blown away by the idea of going to a place that could have been on Mars, right? That was so different in terms of its social, economic, political setup. And I think I was hooked at that stage on trying to understand difference. This was in the middle of the Cold War where, especially for a kid growing up on a farm in Arkansas, if you were interested in difference, the communists were about as different as you could imagine. And since then, I think I've explored that idea through a lot of different research projects and in my own teaching. In particular, how difference gets constructed in given societies. If you begin with the basic idea of human unity, how do we then carve that up into different boxes? And then crucially, and here's the social scientist, political scientist dimension of it, what do states do with that? What's the role of state institutions in manufacturing difference and then in using it to create social hierarchies or using it for governance and so on? So my work has kind of evolved over time, but keeping in mind that key theme. And I have to say, in the last project I was working on, where I get much more into issues of race and gender and sexuality and personal identity, perhaps, than I've done in some of my previous projects, when I began this last work in 2014 or 2015, I kind of thought my own country is beginning to look like places that I know something about. Places in Eastern Europe, in the Balkans, in the former Soviet Union, where personal identity issues suddenly became matters of high politics. And the state's role in using and manipulating those to create kind of caste hierarchies. This was now becoming front and center in American politics. And then, of course, 2016 happens, and then suddenly all of this is once again front and center.
Right.
And I thought I had some comparative perspectives to bring to this, and I'm even more convinced of that now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your most recent book, Gods of the Upper Air, which has been critically acclaimed, was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. For those who haven't had a chance to read it yet, could you share what the book is about?
Yeah, so the book is really a collective biography of a group of thinkers from more or less the first half of the 20th century, some of whom will be quite well known to people, like Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, or the novelist and social scientist, even though we don't know her in that, usually with that label, Zora Neale Hurston. And their mentor, they were all graduate students together, under a mentor named Franz Boas, who was the founder of American anthropology, professor of anthropology at Columbia University, and really one of the great thinkers of the 20th century. And the book tells the story of the intertwining of the personal lives and intellectual lives and professional writing lives of a group of thinkers who, the book argues, helped to create what we now call a progressive, modern, capacious view of human nature. transforming the conversation in the United States and really around the world from one in which human beings come in a set of natural types, that we might call races or nationalities, or this idea that you're born with a set of capabilities and those don't change over the course of your lifetime, depending on the racial, gender, sexual, whatever category to which you're assigned. And then paving the way for this much more broad-minded view of human society, in which we believe that individuals are individuals who are shaped in large measure by the circumstances that they're surrounded by. And of course, that view of the world didn't come out of nowhere, right? I mean, it had to, in a way, be proven, being shown to be the case. And that's what these early social scientists were working to do. They all at some point had the same kind of experience as being outsiders themselves, and realizing that, wait, my own social circumstances my own difficulties in life can only come from one of two places. Either I'm broken and deficient in some way, or there's something about the fit between me and the social, historical, institutional circumstances I'm surrounded by. And so I need to understand how those are shaping my life. And that comes, they spin that into an entire social theory that now underlies so much of how we see the world today.
Wow. And if I understand, you've recently been acknowledged with another award for this book. Could you tell us a little bit about that recent news?
That's right. The book also received a thing called the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, which I'm really proud of. It's given by the Cleveland Foundation. I found out about it because Henry Louis Gates from Harvard called me up on my cell phone, which doesn't happen every day. And I thought first, why does Henry Louis Gates want me to be on Finding Your Roots? That doesn't make any sense at all. But he gave me the news about the award, and it's particularly meaningful to me because the award has been going since the 1930s. It's for work that is in the area of anti-racism and the furthering of human diversity. And particularly meaningful to me is that Zora Neale Hurston won the award in the 1930s for her autobiography, Dust Tracks on a Road, which the title of my book, Gods of the Upper Air, comes from. So I feel this sort of, unearned, humbling connection to someone who's really one of my intellectual heroes, Hurston.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Jack.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
So let me ask you, what can we learn from your exploration of these individuals about our current moment in history? Do you see resonances in our current moment?
Yeah. Well, all of these people, Boaz, Mead, Hurston, others, they would have found our present moment very familiar, They were working at a time of anti-immigrant backlash, at a time when American racism and the problem of racist institutions and the battle against those was very much front and center. When it looked like high politics had when high politics of the country seemed to be dominated by those ideas, while beneath it, you had this incredible American flourishing that took diversity as a given, right? So this was a time of anti-immigrant restriction, of Jim Crow, and the Harlem Renaissance. Right. So that distinction between what's going on at the political level and what's happening at the social level they would have understood that, I think, in our present moment. I think in so many ways it does go to show that in American history, and not only in the history of this country, every time you have advances toward this idea of human unity, of allowing people of all different social categories to realize their own genius and make their own contribution to society, that threatens certain power relationships that have become very comfortable for others who have been in very powerful positions. And that push and pull, the give and take between advance and backlash, has been a hardy perennial of American history. But you see that in so many other societies where the categories may be a little bit different.
Sure.
But the struggle over unity and division is, an essential feature of politics in so many parts of the world.
Yeah. Now, you've been the recipient of several Professor of the Year awards from our students. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach to teaching and the ways that you introduce government and international relations to our students?
Yeah. Well, for me, thinking internationally was a way of thinking more capaciously about myself. Um, uh, I grew up not too far from where J. William Fulbright had his summer home. It was actually just in the holler across from where I grew up. And he's a complex figure, actually, when you think about the relationship between his views on domestic politics in the United States and his internationalism. Um, but he said, the whole purpose of education is to try to see the world as others see it, something that he himself did only imperfectly. And that to me has been the core thing I want to impart to my students, that, that social science at its best is about the training of human empathy. It's about the idea of using the best empirical tools you have, whether it's a data set or an archive or an interview, to try to get into somebody else's way of seeing the world. So we do that a lot in my classes. We're trying to produce our own data or evidence, not just read about the stuff that other people have produced. So I end up learning enormous amounts from my students, and I'm so proud when I see them go on to do amazing things. Not too long ago, a student sent me an email after her first New Yorker piece had come out, and I thought, I'm so privileged to get to see these people at an earlier stage of their lives.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, you've just finished 5 years as chair of the Department of Government, and your service also in the School of Foreign Service has been very, very long and enduring. When you think about our government department and our programs in the School of Foreign Service, perhaps at a more macro level from your direct teaching, what are you hoping our students come away with after they spent some time with us here at Georgetown? What is it we want to impart to our students?
Well, I think if you're 18 years old and you kind of care about the world, there is absolutely no better place in the world to realize that ambition than at Georgetown, whether it's in the School of Foreign Service or government department or elsewhere. I think, we want to impart, as I mentioned earlier, this sort of empathetic understanding of other people and places. And I think we want to give students kind of the hard skills to exercise that, whether that's languages or an appreciation for history or an understanding of culture, to be actual globalists, to be able to move in lots of different environments comfortably. But at the same time, and this is the trick, to have some experiences where you're not the boss. Our students come from environments where, in lots of different senses, they've been, to use a word, privileged. And I don't mean that they've always been, in the top economic category, or they've always been the winner in some way. But the fact that they're at Georgetown is a privileged position in the world. And it's very easy to take that and assume that that's going to be the arc of your life, or that everybody in their own experiences in college or in the working world are in those kind of positions of power. What I mean is to give some students some experiences where they're really uncomfortable, where they walk into a room and they don't know everything, and they have to make their way. And so it's that combination of things that I think is really, really important to me, because at the end of the day, all of that is about sharpening your moral imagination. How can you sort of understand the predicament of someone who is essentially unlike you in some way?
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking this time, and thank you for everything you mean to this community. I can't tell you what a privilege it is to be able to spend this time together. In closing, is there one last word you'd like to leave with our community as we get started in this new semester?
Well, I mean, I have to say I'm watching the response to the coronavirus in some ways remotely, since I've stepped down as chair at the end of my term, and now I'm on a research leave. But in following this through email and missives from the central administration and plans and so forth, I am so proud of everything the institution has done, from the leadership of senior administrators and colleagues who have retooled and have demonstrated an incredible commitment to their students and staff and other faculty members. It's made me very proud to be a part of the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I want to express my appreciation to Professor Charles King for joining us today and for sharing his insights. I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.